we could fill the whole night just on this debate alone. But here's one interesting point to your point that I do think is important for all of us. Again, whether we're right, left, or halfway in between in our political view. I do think that the president or the administration needs to be very careful on the degree to which they may be overplaying their hand. In other words, I think in some cases Republicans have overplayed their hand on some of the Obama or the Affordable Care Act, but I think he's overplaying on the implementation. So I have had a tradition in the years that I've been in and out of Washington of running down the mall down to Lincoln Memorial. And I went down there the other evening, and it was closed up. I had our team do the research on it. I didn't realize this. In the history of our republic, the Lincoln Memorial has never been closed down.
Not till now.
And I mean, in fairness to President Clinton, the last shutdown there in the mid-1980s, it stayed open, as did the other open-air memorials. And I think that I got a really interesting note from the head of DNR yesterday. The Buck Island landed right up there by McCullochville. It's a federal, because the national forest, the land is on federal property, but it's an unmanned, always has been unmanned landing, but they've now barricaded so shrimpers can't go out in shrimping season right now at home to go out and use the land. Just to your point, to make, I guess, to get people a little bit more riled up than they otherwise would be. But we're going to this side. Yes, sir. All right.
We already had a turn.
I'm Walter Stanford.
Yes, sir.
I'm a disabled war veteran. I fought in Vietnam. I have 3 Purple Hearts, Silver Star, and 4 Bronze Stars. I wish all you people would have been there in 1970 when I got off the plane in San Francisco. Baby killer and a murderer, which I've neither done neither of. But anyway, Friday I go to the vet center on Rivers Avenue at Gaslight Square. I've been going there since 2004. We have a group of veterans. Most of us are Vietnam War veterans. There are a few Gulf War veterans in it. None of the new guys. And I'm sure they'll show up sooner or later. But we were told Friday, and I read the letter, that as of the 22nd of this month, October, the Veterans Administration cannot pay us our disability pay. Now, I lost my entire life savings when Lehman Brothers went down. $278,000. That was working for Hospital Corporation of America from 1979 until I had a major heart attack in 2004. I lived month to month to month to month. Without that, I can't live on Social Security. It just irritates me to no end to see everybody playing games with the lives of Americans, not just veterans, but everybody. White, Latino, whatever you are, if you're an American citizen, you deserve to be treated like one. My dad was a career Marine, 32 years in the Marine Corps. When I got drafted, I couldn't run. He would have found me. He did save my life by telling me, don't go in the Marine Corps. I was born on Paris Island. But I have lived a military life my whole life. As I always joke and say, I didn't realize I had hair until I joined the Army. That was the way my dad did it. But I want yourself and Congress to understand, and understand clearly, that people of the United States do not like this bickering back and forth. I have 2 granddaughters. One's at medical school at Emory University. I have a second granddaughter who's at the University of Alabama, starting her first year of nursing school. I'm at the University of Florida, again, graduating.
We're going to keep it relatively short so we can spread this around, but go ahead, sir.
But I just wanted to close in.
Yes, sir.
We have a wonderful country here. I've been all over this country, and I've been all over this world. I've been to places that I never really wanted to go to, because somehow the military sent me there. But there's no place better. And I was born in South Carolina. My mother was a South Carolinian. My grandfather served as a senator in the House of State Senate many, many thousands of years ago. I lived most of my life in Florida until I moved up and worked for Trident all those years. Veterans of this country do not need to be treated like trash being thrown out the door. We're lucky here in South Carolina that we have an excellent VA hospital right down the road here. Not much parking, but it's a great place to go. But one of my wounds that I received was shrapnel in the stomach on May 10th, 1969. On July 10th, 2010, in the middle of the night, I woke up with tremendous pain in my stomach. I called my son, who's a paramedic with the city of Charleston. He came. They took me to the VA. I was in the Veterans Hospital for 14 and a half months. I now have a colostomy. That's life.
So,
Pay the veterans.
I guess I'd say what's striking me is you've sacrificed mightily, as have many others in this room, to perpetuate this republic's very existence.
Didn't want to go, by the way.
But you did. And all of us are indebted to you. That's why you got the round of applause that you did.
And I appreciate that.
And so I guess I'd say two things. One is, in the food fight that's going on, one, there was a bill that passed that would have funded the VA.
I know that. I saw that.
And Senator Reed has tabled it based on, you know, again, the food fight that's going on. I don't want to bore some of you who've heard me quoted, but I think it's relevant. There is no constituency for no in Washington. And there's always a constituency for yes. I remember when I was a freshman in Congress, myself, Jack Kingston, Dan Miller had an amendment to the sugar subsidy program. At that time, the program cost us about $1 billion a year in the form of higher sugar price. And about $250 million in America, which would be about $4 a head. Who in the world is going to take a trip to Washington, D.C. to save $4 on the price of sugar each year? I mean, nobody in their right mind, right? On the other side of the equation, there were about 60 domestic sugar producers in the United States, the largest of whom was the Van Hool family, who at that time was on the Forbes 400 list, and they got about $60 million a year of personal benefit as a result of the program. Needless to say, they were in town. And so you have this sort of lopsidedness, which is, you kind of sound like a jerk, or at least mean-spirited, if you're trying to put the brakes on much of anything in Washington, because there is not much of a constituency for no, but there's a lot of constituency for yes. And so what I would give, you know, Republican leadership, and I'm not saying it's been handled perfectly, I'm not saying that, but at least and they've overplayed the hand on some of the Obama stuff. I mean, glad to see that. But the larger point that is now brewing is, how do we put the brakes on this thing so that the country that all of us care about, regardless of our political stripe, is sustained for the next 100, 200, and 300 years? I mean, that's the conundrum that's before us. And some of you all heard me quote this, but there was this little known Scottish historian who studies history for the whole of his life. And the quote attributed to him at life's end was that a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote for themselves largesse from the public treasury, with the result that democracy always fails under loose fiscal policy and is generally followed by dictatorship. The aggregate of the years, these nations have progressed through this sequence, from bondage to spiritual faith to great courage to liberty, liberty to abundance, abundance to selfishness, selfishness to complacency, complacency to apathy, apathy to dependency, and from dependency back again into bondage. And what a lot of folks are struggling with, which is how do we get our arms around that timeline of civilizations? Because if you sure enough look at the history of of civilizations, whether it's the Romans or the Egyptians, or go down the list, something seems to go wrong over time. And so I think that this idea, and more often, I mean, you know, Lawrence Kotlikoff has some interesting stuff on a thing called generational accounting. Paul Kennedy wrote a great book on the rise and fall of great powers, talking about how basically they got ahead of themselves with regard to spending. And so I think that there is validity to the point that says somehow, regardless of our political persuasion, we got to find a way, without harming people, of putting the brakes on some of this stuff. And that's the $94 question. And it causes in divided government, which is what we have right now, a whole lot of squawking back and forth. Because take this room and multiply it times 100, that's kind of the forces that you have at bear up in Washington, D.C., as people very legitimately disagree with each other on how you skin the cat. But you've been having your hand up for a long time back there. Oh, I know you're not going to agree with me. How are you? Good to see you.
I want to thank you for having these town meetings. I think that is a good role to play and allow you to listen. I do, and you also said that the Constitution provides that Congress shall make the laws, the Supreme Court shall interpret them, and the President will administer them. And in the Affordable Care Act, Congress passed that. The Supreme Court upheld it. So why are we closing down the government after 40 attempts already to stop it? Furthermore, now Congress says, well, let's pay the people who are federal employees who want to work and keep the government closed so that if someone wants to go to Fort Sumter, they can't go. How does that make any sense?
I'll just stack up two people who's a lot smarter than I am. Jack, you're one of them. You know, Jack, for those who don't know him, is one of our noted writers and historians in this part of the world. And so it's nice to see you. We've long disagreed on our politics, but that's what makes the world go around. And I think that I would simply say this. There was an interesting article today by Charles Krauthammer. I'd say you're smarter than I am, and I'd say Charles Krauthammer is also smarter than I am. And he makes a very interesting point saying, well, not so quickly. Because it indeed did pass. It indeed was interpreted by the Supreme Court. But it's being administered, in other words, after all those things happen, in a way that he would argue is unconstitutional. I think he makes a very... He cast that argument, and I would just recommend to you, it was again in today's paper, I don't know if it appeared in the Charleston paper, it was in our
Yes.
Oh, it did? Okay. Wait, I think that's probably worth all of us chewing on. Go over to this side, yes, sir.
Again, I want to mirror Jack's comments. Thank you for soliciting our input. Two comments that I would make. I would suggest a clean continuing resolution. And I would suggest that because it's not just hurting federal employees. My son works for the state, and the state is administering a program that the feds fund. All right, they're not going to fund that, so what's going to happen? Nikki wants to fund it. She's going to furlough my son. She furloughs my son for longer than 10 days, and he's lost his job. All right, I can give you the second example. We have people that are working out at federal laboratories ready to harvest data that will yield incredible information and work towards young people getting their continuing education and advanced degrees. They're not going to be allowed to go into the laboratories, to go into the fields to collect the data. And this is unconscionable. A clean continuing resolution, and then let's work on the other thing.
Here's, I guess, part of what I'm struggling with. Let's say we pass a clean CR tonight, okay? Yeah, if the Republican version was to take it to roughly middle of December, the Democratic version was to take it to middle of November, right? So then what do we do?
You negotiate.
Okay, but here's if we do not resolve the spending issue that again separates House and Senate, that's causing this time bomb to go off. So
Let's not use people's livelihoods as pawns. If we can have this conversation in November, let's not use people's paychecks and their jobs as pawns in a fight with the
It'll be in
no,
November.
okay. So here, that point was, let's deal with it now. But again, I go back to the question I'm struggling with, which is nobody. I mean, again, I get it that people are caught in the crosshairs and frustrated. And an interesting little fun fact: I didn't realize this. The Charleston area is the 10th most impacted area in the United States of America, based on the size of the federal workforce and suppliers and contractors, etc., out of the whole country. So we're feeling it here. I get it. But again, the part I'm struggling with, and it's an imperfect art in terms of trying to decipher the tea leaves and representing folks up there. But is what do I still struggle with what do we do in 6 weeks?
Martin, we don't have many options left. If we
Well, I
don't
want to
negotiate,
no,
what
but
can we do?
but I want to keep everybody else included. But okay, so I hear your point. Let's skip over coming. Wait, no, I have to go this side. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to add to maybe to just extend upon a question that was asked earlier that I don't think has been answered. We have shut down the government by blocking the budget extension, but based on something that has nothing to do with the budget extension. Meantime, it's costing us $12 million an hour. I mean, in my opinion, it sounds like you're holding us ransom and making us pay, you're holding us hostage, and we have to pay our own ransom. It's not making sense.
There we go.
What I said was that the government has been shut down by blocking for the budget extension, but based on something that has nothing to do with the budget extension. That's fair. And based on something, but it's not included in the budget.
Okay, so his point is, well, and in fairness to your point, that's why I said up front, I thought to a degree Republicans had overplayed their hand on the Affordable Care Act. But whether you agree with that or not, there's still this bigger issue. I mean, I think there is a constitutional issue that's well pointed out. I think that there's an equity issue in terms of large corporation versus not. But at the end of the day, you're not going to win that fight if it's just the House versus the Senate. Now, what they were trying to do is force a conversation. Because negotiation, that process of sitting around the table, whether it's a kitchen table with your family or whether it's a boardroom table in a business, of forcing that conversation, then you get a concession. I mean, throughout our history, there has always been concession on both sides of the equation. I mean, that's how we keep the sausage making machine working up in Washington, D.C. And so what I'd say is, whether if you stripped out Obamacare right now, which would be your point, the part I'm still struggling with, you say clean CR tomorrow. In a month or in 6 weeks, we're right back at this point of what do we do about this bigger spending problem? What would you say to that?
What I say is let's deal with the circumstances that were included in just the budget extension. And worry about Obamacare on something that's completely related to Obamacare.
No, but I'm saying,
The Office of Disability Rights has been closed.
Right.
The Civil Rights Office has been closed. There's other offices pertaining to veterans benefits.
all kinds of
closed.
I agree.
And all, but only based on this one factor of Obamacare, which has nothing to do with everything that's being funded right now. In fact, it continued off, it took off like a rocket the very next day. So if that's the issue, then take to that issue. But go ahead and put the budget back in, pass the budget extension.
No, but I'm saying, okay, I want to keep the conversation, we'll come back to that thought though. You know what, all right. It's an important one. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mark. First of all, I want to thank you for the votes you've been making. I've been behind you 100%. I'm listening to all these federal workers, and I feel really bad for you, but what you're going through is what those of us in the private sector have been going through. Due to this economy was cut in half because the jobs just aren't out there. You put Obamacare on, and this economy is going to continue its trajectory downwards. We need to What is the unemployment rate? For the rest of us in the private sector is, if you take the original number, it's 14%. We've been carrying this burden alone for a long time. I just got to say to you federal workers, welcome to the party.
The private sector,
We live as second-class citizens.
I'm trying to alternate as much as I can. Do you want to speak?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Congressman, I appreciate being here. I'd just like to succinctly say that we're not going to resolve all these things tonight, as you stated. I would like to carry back to Washington. And from my perspective, I've been in the private business my entire life. A few years ago, in the construction business, the real estate development business, which I've spent 30 years in, crashed. It crashed, in my opinion, because of the nonsense in Washington. If they had worked for me, and I have run companies with hundreds of employees for many years today, it's just me. Okay? And nobody bailed me. I didn't ask for it. I'm not asking for it today. It was up to me, from a corporate or a private business entrepreneur. I'm trying to be calm about it. I would fire
You're doing great.
these people. I would fire a lot of people up there. I appreciate the votes you have. My heart goes out for all of our government workers. We have lots of government workers. But I am infuriated over the time with the hard work, the investments that we've made, that we set aside, pay for our kids' colleges, pay for our homes, did the right things with our churches, with our charities, et cetera, and then we're basically wiped out of our savings, our investments, and everything else because of the nonsense in Washington.
Hallelujah.
It is a good thing that no longer in this country that we are so geographically divided that we will be able to have another civil war. Because I believe between the views of where people are and the way the government treats the citizens as if we don't matter anymore, there would be another war.
I mean,
go ahead.
Thanks, sir. I'd like to echo several people in gratitude that you're here. You joke that you're a low-level guy, but it means that you're here talking to us, and I think we all appreciate that. I'd like the chance to make two comments. One is personal. 27 years old, never lapsed in health insurance until a few months ago. Basically, I work 3 part-time jobs, turns out to be about 60 hours a week. Finally, my wife got a nice corporate job. I said, yeah, I finally have really solid health insurance, not just student health insurance. So I decided to go get some tests done for something that was bothering me. They recommended some tests that cost about $5,000. In the meantime, my wife left her job. I can't afford to get the tests done. And when we tried to bridge over to pay for our own insurance, they denied me coverage. So for that reason, I'm for, personally, at least selfishly, for Obamacare. The second point I'd like to make. The second point I'd like to make is that none of this is actually about Obamacare. Several people have mentioned that that's not a budget issue. Just to pick on the 2 points, the 2 examples that you made, the carrier in Jimmy Carter's days and the bill that you added 100 amendments to, neither of those was passed into law or tested by the Supreme Court. So a lot of people are concerned about the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare right now, but I don't understand why the same conversation couldn't be had regarding any other law that our district would rather change, whether it's abortion, immigration, any other law. And similarly, when Democrats are in office, we might want to use the budget process as leverage to defund the military or something else that's kind of ridiculous. So that's why I would be in favor of passing a clean resolution. I don't think that this is the time when the government is partially shut down to address our concerns with big government, with any law that has been upheld by the Supreme Court.
I would say my prayers are with you on your health issue, and I hope it's resolved safely and well. I would say that from a heart standpoint, I mean, I think we all get what you're saying. I mean, the whole idea of whether it's coverage, whether it's pre-existing condition, I mean, all those things. From a head standpoint, I think what we're all struggling with is how do we afford it? I mean, so the numbers on it are very, very expensive. It's about $1 trillion. The total 75-year cost is about $6.2 trillion. And so, but we're going to iron that out. That's sort of as a society as we move forward. But I think that the bigger question that I think a lot of people are struggling with is, again, leave Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act off to the side, and you'd say we still have a financial conundrum before us as a society, and what are we going to do about it? And you can pass the clean up CR. I mean, I've a number of y'all have spoken on that. But we still, as a group, all of us together with very different opinions and very different wants out of government, have to come up with some way of deciding how are we going to solve the fiscal gap. Fiscal gap in this country is about 5% of GDP. It's about, to your point, you brought up something on, I guess, defense earlier. It is equivalent of everything that we spend on defense, not just a portion of, not an aircraft carrier. It is equivalent of everything that we spend on defense would have to be wiped out to, in essence, bring our numbers back into alignment. And so you look at the history, and you say, okay, in these kinds of cases with shutdowns, the end of the financial year, CR, there have been 17 cases since basically, the mid-70s forward, wherein folks from different persuasions, Republican or Democrat, have used as a leverage point to try and affect that which they cared about. And if you look at the debt ceiling debate, it's even more intense. I pulled the numbers on that. Since 1978, there have been 53 rises to the debt ceiling. Now, over 50% of those have had things attached to them by Democratic Congresses. 50%. Congresses were taken over more recently by Republicans, about 7% about 15% by Republicans, and the in between the sort of divided Congresses. One group might be Republican, the other group might be Democrat on House or Senate side.
But if you did it wrong before, that doesn't mean you have to keep doing it wrong from now forward. Why can't we resolve this by completing the CR, and we can discuss this while the government's back in business?
If you did it wrong before, that means you have to do it that way again. But the question I would raise as a new legislator, 5 months into this Congress is, in this case, if you add up the debt ceiling, you add up the other, you're looking at about 70 cases where it has been done before. That's the only precedent we have. It's been constantly done before. I'm not justifying it, but I'm saying as a historical fact, it has been a leverage point that's been used repeatedly. Your point is legitimate, though. I guess I was over here. I'm coming to you next. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I'm glad you were here tonight. I have a problem with the continuing resolution. How can you expect the United States Senate to pass a budget? Because if they passed a budget, it wouldn't be a continuing resolution. No, they didn't. Not for 4 years.
I want to echo what this lady said in front of me here. As a businessman from the private sector, I feel very badly for the federal employees. It's a horrible thing for anybody to have to go through. Having said that, the losses that we've taken in the private sector over the last 6-7 years, we're never going to get paid back. When the government goes back to work, thankfully, the federal employees will get repaid. We won't. Now, having been in business for upwards of 30 years, I have a 4-year-old daughter.